I know it doesn't really feel like it, but the Raiders play football tomorrow, which is kind of wild because it seems like it was just like a couple days ago that the Raiders lost to the Jaguars at the end of the game. And now we're already looking forward to this next game against the Denver Broncos, and we're going to talk about it today. The Raiders are getting healthy, right? The Raiders obviously last week got Brock Bowers back. It really opened up the offense, right? We scored the most points this season against the Jags, the most points in any other game, right? Came against the Jags. We found a ton of success on the offensive side. And what's crazy is we still left points out there. You failed the 2-point conversion. You had a missed field goal. So that alone right there, right, is 3 points that the Raiders essentially left out there. You had a interception. You had a turnover on downs, and the turnover on downs came when the Raiders were in field goal position. So, the Raiders left points out there, and then the offense clicked a little bit. And in the game tomorrow against the Denver Broncos, we're now getting a little bit healthier, and this time on the defensive side. Now, the Raiders defense struggled against the Jags, and I think one of the big issues with the Raiders is players are playing out of position. And I almost feel like people don't really think about this, but there was a time when Lonnie Johnson, who will play, by the way, tomorrow, according to Ryan McFadden, Lonnie Johnson, there was a time, was supposed to be our starting post safety, right? Free safety, quote unquote. But in the cover 3 scheme, it was essentially going to be the post safety for the Raiders. And he's playing tomorrow. And Lonnie Johnson was pretty good, right? At least according to some of the reports that are coming out of camp. Lonnie Johnson was supposed to be a big part of what the Raiders did on the defensive side. And I say this because the Raiders struggled against the Denver Broncos. But just the way our offense kind of got going last week against the Jags after it got healthy, is it possible that the defense starts to get healthy as Lonnie Johnson gets back for the Raiders? And I say this because, when Lonnie Johnson comes back for the Raiders, a couple things happen. First and foremost, Isaiah Pola-Mao is no longer playing out of position. Isaiah Pola-Mao now drops down into the box, and he can be a true box safety. And the Raiders did make him a box safety a lot this past week, which led to him having a pretty damn good game, at least on tape. And now Lonnie Johnson's going to come in, and that's going to make Isaiah Pola-Mao a box safety for most of the game tomorrow. Jeremy Chinn already kind of plays down in the box, but he's been playing a lot of corner. And I think now you'll get Isaiah Pola-Mao to play that corner position, and Jeremy Chinn can ultimately play that strong safety position, where he doesn't have to cover as much, which is something he had to do a lot this past week and even the weeks before, because Lonnie Johnson did not play. And I think we're at the point now where the Raiders defense is starting to get healthy. The offense is starting to get healthy. And we're going to see what the Raiders can do against a Denver Broncos team that has had a lot of success this season. But the Broncos have also won a lot of close games, something the Raiders haven't really done. And I bring this up because I actually tweeted this. It has over 700 likes up to this point. I posted this at 10 o'clock, so it's been like 3-4 hours. But the tweet says this. It says the following. Pretty crazy to think this, but if the Raiders made the field goal that was blocked versus the Bears and converted the 2 points versus the Jags, they would be 4-4 right now and in the playoffs as the 7th seed. That's wild to think. And I looked it up. If the Raiders won against the Bears, remember, we were in field goal range. We should have technically won that game. And of course, the Bears blocked the kick against the Jags. We had the 2-point conversion, right? Like, we had to score a touchdown to tie the Jags in overtime, and our offense did it. And then we had the 2-point conversion to win the game. And unfortunately, we didn't convert. But if we had converted, we would be 4-4. And think about what we would be thinking right now. The Raiders offense has not clicked this season. Obviously, the Jags game was the first time they actually did click. But the Raiders would be 4-4, and we'd literally be in the playoffs right now. And it's not like I'm saying, hey, what if we beat the Patriots or the Chargers, right? A game we kind of got our asses kicked. What if we beat the Colts? Like, we were never going to beat the Colts. We could have beat the Bears. We could have beat the Jags. And if you just won those 2 games, you're the 7th seed in the playoffs. Again, to me, that is crazy to think. But it's not that crazy if you really think about it, right? Like the difference between making the playoffs and missing the playoffs isn't really that much. Even more than that, I know the Raiders are 2-6 right now, but the Raiders could easily finish with 9 or 10 wins this season. Right? The Raiders could easily go on a run. It's not like our schedule is so crazy. We beat the Patriots. Thinking about that, right? We literally beat a team that's 7-2 right now. The Raiders beat a team or almost beat a team in like the Chicago Bears, for example. The Jags, these are teams that have 5-6 wins as well. So it wouldn't be crazy if the Raiders won some games as they kind of go forward. And I say all this just to kind of reel it back. The Raiders are getting healthy. And I know a lot of people are saying, hey, the Raiders got to get their future quarterback. You got to bring in that franchise guy. But I'm telling you guys, the Raiders will not be drafting a quarterback. Pete Carroll likes what he's seen from Geno Smith. Pete Carroll's not planning on moving off of Geno Smith. And Pete Carroll does not care about the Raiders, their long-term success necessarily. Right? He doesn't care if they have a franchise quarterback in 7 years because he's not going to be here. What Pete Carroll cares about right now is improving this current team as much as possible and using a first-round pick on a quarterback that's going to essentially, sit behind Geno Smith for at least another year, which puts Pete Carroll in year 3 and then starting a rookie quarter or second-year quarterback at that point. That's not in Pete Carroll's timeline. I say this because the Raiders at some point have to start winning football games, and that could start against the Denver Broncos tomorrow. From an injury perspective, the Raiders are getting healthier, so we will be mostly healthy. Obviously, Aiden O'Connell will be out. He's not going to play, which doesn't really impact us, right? Because he's not starting. Lonnie Johnson will play. He is listed as questionable, but he has practiced in full this entire week. Isaiah Palomount, Adam Butler were both limited. So that's something to just kind of keep an eye on. But again, I think both guys should be good to go. Isaiah Palomount did practice in full on Monday, which makes me believe that, after a full day's worth of practice, maybe he felt a little bit of tightness in that hip. And he was limited the next 2 days. I think he should be good to go as well. Same with Adam Butler. Butler had a couple of really, really nice plays on tape. And then, of course, for the for the Broncos, I think the big one, Patrick Surtain is out, which isn't surprising. We already knew he was not going to end up playing. Marvin Mims, one of their 3 starting wide receivers, is also out for the Chargers. So that'll benefit the Raiders a little bit. And I want to talk about this game, but before I talk about the actual game, I want to take a second to talk about something Pete Carroll told us in the presser. Pete Carroll told us that Dante Thornton Jr. will be active this week versus the Denver Broncos. I want to talk about this because if you guys remember, Thornton was our starting wide receiver at some point, and he basically went from starting to a guy with a ton of upside to a guy that ended up getting replaced by Jack Bech in one game, right? They kind of split the snaps to Jack Bech just taking over in the next week's game, and then ultimately Thornton's just a healthy scratch every week going forward. And people are like, how the hell does this happen where you have a guy that came into the season as your starting wide receiver, and then essentially you just basically put this guy on the bench to ultimately just make him inactive? Pete Carroll actually did tell us that Thornton will be active. Of course, Kobe Myers has been traded, which does obviously open up another roster spot among the wide receivers. But here's the interesting thing. There was a Raiders insider who actually said that Dante Thornton is, quote, pretty far away right now. And this is a guy that attends Raiders camps. This is a guy that has basically seen Dante Thornton up close. He said that, hey, I'm okay if you want to put Lockett out there on the outside. I just think Dante Thornton is pretty far away right now. And maybe, he beats out Tyler Lockett and earns another shot to play that wide receiver position. I have a feeling the Raiders are going to be playing a lot of 12 personnel. So that third wide receiver is probably going to play 25 plays maybe per game. I don't mind that necessarily going to Tyler Lockett. Kind of interesting, right? Kind of interesting if you guys ask me. So Vincent Bonsignore has obviously been at the Las Vegas Raiders practices, camp, all that stuff. And he thinks Dante Thornton is pretty far away, and that does not surprise me. After week 3 or two or three, at some point I started talking about Thornton, and I said I don't think the Raiders should have this guy out there and he should be starting because he could not catch football. It's he's one of those let the ball hit me in my chest, right? Darius Hayward-Bay type, as opposed to saying let me use my hands. And that's kind of what Thornton was doing, and until you can develop that, you're not going to have success out there. And of course, he's not a great route runner already. He can't run a full route tree, which is something we kind of already knew. And it's kind of crazy to think this because now the Raiders are going to have to rely on Thornton almost a little bit. Now, I still think Trey Tucker is going to be really your wide receiver 1. I think on the other side of it, Tyler Lockett will be your second wide receiver. And I think the third wide receiver will probably be Jack Bech at this point. And as Vincent Bonsignore says, I think the Raiders are running a lot of 12 personnel, right? Which means you only need 2 wide receivers out there at a time. I think Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers are going to play a ton of snaps. Probably 75% of all of our snaps will have those 2 guys out there. The other 25% of snaps will have 3 wide receivers. But at this point, you can kind of just line up Brock Bowers as that third wide receiver and just kind of stay in that 12 personnel, which also allows you to have success running the football. And I know the Raiders haven't had a lot of success running, but if I'm the Raiders, I am, sticking to the run, of course. And I think that's going to allow you to have a little bit of success against the Denver Broncos. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this game. I think the Denver Broncos is definitely a winnable game for the Raiders. And I know a lot of people are going to respond saying, hey, why would you want to beat the Broncos? Why are you trying to go into a game when you're 2-6, your season's over? Why not tank and get that quarterback? And I am, I could basically guarantee it to you guys. The Raiders will not draft the quarterback. If we have the 3rd, 4th, or 5th overall pick, we're going to get the best offensive tackle, the best wide receiver, the best defensive tackle or defensive end. The Raiders will not take a quarterback, and I can almost guarantee you guys that. So with that being stated, does it even make sense at this point to say, hey, let's just tank the rest of the season and only win 2 games, go into next season thinking, hey, we're a 2-win team, we're a garbage team? Or does it make sense to say, hey, the Denver Broncos just won 2 playoff games, we beat that team twice? Or the Chargers won a playoff game and we beat that team, or the Chiefs? Or some of these other teams are playing, right? The Cowboys, and then there's a couple other teams that we're going to play this season. Would it make sense for the Raiders to beat some of these teams, have the mindset that we can beat these teams, and then go into next season with the mindset that, yes, you know what, we have the 10th, 11th overall pick, but we won 6 games last season, 7 games last season. And had we, made a field goal, had we made a 2-point conversion, and although we only won 7 games, we could have won 9 or 10 games had we just had the luck kind of on our side. Kind of like the Denver Broncos, right? If you guys go look at some of the scores that they've had, they're winning 1, 2, 3-point games. They've gotten lucky, right? The ball has bounced their way as opposed to the other team's way. And remember, Sean Payton is technically in his 2nd season. So, he has, with the Broncos specifically, so he has been able to, get a team and build it the way he wants, right? Get his group of guys, and he's been able to kind of fine tune that. And that allows you to have success as opposed to the Raiders. The ball just bounces the wrong way, or a guy just misses a block. And I think part of this is because these new coaches that we have don't have their own players, if that makes sense. Either way, man, let's talk about this Denver Broncos game tomorrow. I am still going into this game where I think the Raiders should try winning every single game. They should try making the playoffs this season, even though it's unrealistic. What if the Raiders get hot, and just win every single game from this point forward? Wouldn't that be wild? And again, I know it's probably not going to happen, but I don't know. I just want the Raiders to try to win football games. Try, to get to a point where, those games against the Bears, the games against the Jags, you can actually win those games. Because I think that's going to carry over from for the Raiders into next season, right? That mindset, I think, carries over. So let's talk about the Denver Broncos. Easily, I think the Broncos' biggest asset that they have is their offensive line. By far, they're probably the best offensive line. If not the best, they're one of the 2 or 3 best offensive lines. And for the Raiders, our defensive line is not great. The Denver Broncos are going to come out and they're going to try to bully us. They're going to say, we're going to run over this weak defensive line that the Raiders have. We're going to bully Malcolm Koonce. We're going to bully Maxx Crosby. We're going to double team and get up to those linebackers. Jamal Adams, right, safety, we're going to put him into the dirt. That's the mindset that the Denver Broncos play with, right? And they have a good offensive line. Garrett Bowles, one of the best left tackles in the NFL. Their right guard, Quinn Menez, one of the best guards in the NFL. Mike McGlinchey's a very solid run blocker. A left guard center, maybe not as known, but they're pretty solid as well. And they make it work with those guys. But the other 3 guys that I mentioned are good football players. And again, it just clicks and it just works for the Broncos. They have 2 good running backs. They got J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey, the rookie. I think R.J. Harvey at some point will take over. And I think Harvey's a really good running back. I really liked him when he came out of college. If you guys go look at, search through my Twitter, I talked about Harvey really early on, compared him to Josh Jacobs. And the Denver Broncos took him in the 2nd round, early in the 2nd round. So at some point, Harvey's going to get going. And of course, that doesn't include guys like Courtland Sutton, who I think is a pretty good wide receiver. They got guys like Troy Franklin, who's kind of broken out this season. The Broncos, they're a good football team, man, on the offensive side. And of course, the Broncos believe that Bo Nix is the future of this team. They believe he's a franchise quarterback. And this is the best Bo Nix we will have played up to this point. We're going to see a guy that's either a franchise guy, or we'll see the same guy we kind of saw last year, right? He's good, not great. But the Raiders got to go out and they got to try to win, man. I'm telling you guys, we cannot allow Denver Broncos to not even just beat us, but like, I don't think we beat them last year at all. I don't even know when the last time we beat the Broncos was, to be honest with you guys. We got to go out there. We got to beat this team, man. Now, it's not going to be easy, especially on the other side of it. Of course, our defense, we'll see what they can kind of do. But on the offensive side for us, it's not going to be easy. The Broncos have a very, very, very good edge player. A lot of people don't really know who Nik Bonitto is. And maybe that's because Colton Miller kind of shuts him down mostly. But we don't have Colton Miller, right? We have Stone Forsythe. And Nik Bonitto super fast, man. When I think about quickest edge players, fastest edge players in the NFL, I think Abdul Carter, Micah Parsons, Nik Bonitto is probably the third fastest edge player in the NFL. The guy lined up against Joe Alt and dominated Joe Alt, right? And Joe Alt, I think, got hurt in that game, so he missed a lot of that game. But he had, I think 2 sacks on Joe Alt before he ended up getting hurt. Nik Bonitto is legit, and Stone Forsythe's not the fastest, nor is DJ Glaze. So, Chip Kelly, man, you're going to have to figure out how to slow those two guys down. That doesn't include Zach Allen, who's a really good defensive tackle. I think he's third in pressures at the moment, or quarterback hits. So the Denver Broncos, man, they have a good defensive line. They have a good front seven. They got Dre Greenlaw as one of their linebackers. Alex Singleton's very solid as well. Kareem Reed, shout out to him, man. A lot of people don't know who he is. He was at the Hula Bowl, had a lot of conversation with this guy. Went to Utah, and he ended up making the 53-man roster of the Denver Broncos. Shout out to Kareem Reed. And of course, they also got Hufanga, another very solid safety, hard hitter. But the Raiders can have success against the Broncos. So the Broncos have a good front seven, so I think running the football is going to be hard, but their secondary is, it's a little banged up. PJ Locke was supposed to be one of their starters. He's out. Pat Surtain, he's out. So you have a shot to be able to go after some of those guys, right? Hopefully the Raiders are able to find success against the Denver Broncos. And then more than just their defense being good, I'm going to just be honest with you guys. I really need to see the Las Vegas Raiders offense to continue to build from what we saw last week. And I think it's very important. If you guys realistically think about this, the Raiders left guard, center, and right guard, right? The current guys that are starting, these could be our starters going into next season. I know Dylan Parra might not. I think there's a chance he ends up getting swapped out. But I looked at some of the free agents that are coming out in this next in this next cycle. There's not a lot of good interior offensive linemen. There's a chance Dylan Parham's the best guard coming out, which is kind of wild to think because he's not that good. The Raiders could easily go into next season with these guys as their starters. I need these guys to continue to flash, continue to show us what they have, and just continue to get better. DJ Glaze, we don't know if he's the future or not. I don't think he is, honestly. I think I have more confidence in what I've seen from Charles Grant to develop and be the franchise guy at right tackle. But we still don't know. Maybe he is, right? And I want to see him and see what he can kind of do out there. But more than the offensive lineman, Geno Smith, man, what he showed us this past week and even the first game of the season, he looked good, man. And the first game of the season wasn't as good because it was raining. But I'm telling you guys, against the Jags, the offense looked very efficient. We ran a lot of quick game, right? And we were essentially able to drive right downfield. And I think that's perfect, right? It makes sense that, hey, if these teams are going to play two safeties deep, if you're not able to push the ball over the top, and maybe that's also partly because our receivers aren't that good. If you're unable to push the ball over the top, run that quick game, pick up 5, 6, 7, 8 yards, and let Brock Bowers and Trey Tucker create. All right, let these guys make plays with their legs. Get Ashton Jeanty the ball in space. And I think for the Raiders, I want to see what Geno Smith can do because, again, I'm confident Geno Smith's going to be the quarterback for the Raiders going into next season. Unless he gets hurt, right, or it's like a season-ending injury, he's going to be the Raiders quarterback. I'm almost 100% sure of that. So going into next season, I'd rather have a quarterback that doesn't just win 2 games and now he's our quarterback again. I'd rather have a quarterback that gets hot. Maybe he wins 6 games. Maybe he wins 7 games. And then we can go into next season with the quarterback that kind of got hot. And you can add wide receivers in the offseason. A lot of guys that I think will become available And then, of course, even the draft, there's a couple of really good playmakers coming out this year's in the draft. So, again, I think for the Raiders, I want to see what this team can do. I want to see what Geno Smith can do. I think it's very important for the Raiders to win. I cannot continue to say that enough. And I know a lot of you guys are going to disagree with it. But I think it's important for the Raiders to try to win, try to get better, go into next season on a high note as opposed to you only win 2 games. I think it's very important. We'll see what ends up happening, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.